Welcome to the Mount Rushmore on, the show where we definitively rank the top 4 in films, TV shows, and pop culture in general. I'm your host, Chris Brennan, and with me today is filmmaker and editor Paul Bush.
How we doing, Chris? How we doing, Richie?
And also the reigning, defending RCW champion, Richie Owens.
Oh, guys, I'm excited to be here. I've got my little pickaxe. I'm ready to start carving in those names on the Mount Rushmore. My pickaxe may be small, but my heart is big, and I'm ready. Let's go!
I like it. I'm sure if anyone's listening to this, they'll actually know the concept of the Mount Rushmore. But just in case they don't, what we're going to be doing is basically defining the pillars, the pinnacle of subject matter. So if it's going to be a specific film genre, we are going to dedicate ourselves to defining what are the top ones. It's a little different than a ranking system where there's a number 1, 2, 3, or 4. These are equals in their tier at the highest level. And so, considering this is the spooky season, we decided for our inaugural episode, we'll be focused on horror movies. So before we get started, I actually wanted to ask Paul Bush a question.
Okay.
And just to get a little background on like your interest and experience when it comes to horror films. This could be from a fan or a filmmaker.
Okay, background is, look, liked horror, but had to really get into horror to impress a girl, my wife, because all she would watch would be horror. So it's a good reason to start watching more and more horror. And yeah, I just really took to it. I think it's like my favorite genre because because it's I was saying it, Chris, it's the genre with the most subgenres. So like, everyone knows like horror, body horror, horror comedy, sci-fi horror. Like it's the one genre that you can keep turning on its head over and over and over again and create something new. So I see it as like one of the most creative genres, and the genres with the most scope to do whatever you want. And it's definitely like even a genre that constantly can get like reborn, or like the properties in it, whether you look at like Halloween or like anything, like there's just always new ways of interpreting those stories because horror gives you that scope, whereas you can't really do that with like a drama, thriller, comedy, anything else, because you can really kind of sort of allows you to go anywhere.
A really interesting thing about what you said there about like horror as a genre, because you'll get like one movie that will just turn up and that will just completely spin everything on its head and just create that sub-genre. And I feel like horror can do that. As you said, there's not many other franchises or like genres that can do that, where you'll get something that will define like whether it is this is now the slasher genre, this is now the whatever X, Y, or Z. And it's really, really interesting the way it's evolved over the years, I feel.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the oldest genres, isn't it? Like, people have always wanted to be scared. Even like theatrical plays, stories, nursery rhymes. People love horror. It's going all the way back.
Yeah. How about you, Richie? How is your background, interest, or experience when it comes to horror? Have you been a fan, or are you avoiding it?
Well, it's always kind of been there. I've never really been like too much of a guy to be spooked by anything like that. But my dad is a big horror fan, so we always kind of grew up with a lot of these kind of horror movies, a lot of ones that I want to discuss, so I don't want to reveal too much right now, but it was kind of like always there, where horror was always a big part of my childhood, watching movies way too early when I probably shouldn't have, a lot of these kind of spooky movies and stuff like that. And it was like the interest was always there. It wouldn't be my favorite genre of film now, to be perfectly honest, but I always like a good horror, especially around this time of year. And if something is really, really good, I'll make the effort of watching it. I think I like older horror movies now. A lot of the kind of newer stuff doesn't really grab me as much. Like maybe the likes of Get Out and stuff like that was quite good. But I think I wouldn't be seeking out every horror movie now. But I really respect a lot of the movies we're going to talk about today. And it's always kind of just been there in the background.
And for me, on my side, I've always been a fan of horror, but I watched a few of them when I was younger, but not that too young of age. I have very distinct memories of going to the video store when I was young and sneaking away from the parents to go into the horror section and being mesmerized and like traumatized by the covers and the back of the covers. Like I have no context. It's like all in my imagination. So when I had the opportunity to like understand what that meant, I leapt at it. And in the past couple of years, I've deep dived into like the old classics to the kind of lost gems. And so it's been like genre of choice for me in the past 3 years. It's been really good.
Cool.
All right. So I think now we should start electing some potential candidates and trying to put them into the pool. And after that, we'll probably then have a discussion as to who actually makes the top four. So let's kick it over to Paul Bush. Paul, do you have
Okay.
a starter for us that you want to nominate or select?
Okay, I'll throw something forward. And just as a warning, I realized when I just threw down a few ideas that some of them come out in the same year. They're coming from the same country. They're, so I realized a bit of a trend in this in terms of like even like the
Yeah.
origin of the filmmaker. So it was funny that. But look, first one I'm going to throw forward is sort of timely, given that the threequel is in production. So it's 28 days later.
Oh, wow.
So I got to say, like, that was a film that I had a visceral reaction to in the cinema. I remember seeing that in the cinema and it scared the living shit out of me. And I think like, Danny Boyle did an incredible job with it. And it was definitely a cutting edge film at the time, a pretty much unknown cast at the time as well. Cillian Murphy in the leading role. Brendan Gleeson was in there. So we had two Irish in there and, the top four roles, which was brilliant. The way the film, like it's famous for how it was shot. Like it was shot nearly like a guerrilla style filmmaking. They could barely close down streets. They had to steal a lot of shots, like run around London at 4 o'clock in the morning and pretend it was abandoned. And especially it's a film that came out in 2002. Danny Boyle wanted to be able to shoot it in a certain way, so like they shot it on a Canon XL 100 or something. I can't remember exactly what the camera was, but my buddy Brian had that same camera. So it was so cool, to kind of like see this film. And then a couple of years later, I met Brian and he bought that camera. And like you had this tool in your hand that Danny Boyle had made 28 days later with. And so it was like, it's sort of a film also that awoke something in me and I think for a lot of people that made them feel they could make something. So I think it's a credible film. I'll start going on about it in a second, but I think just everything from how it was shot, why they chose the camera they shot on, that feeling of surveillance in the city, the way they had a lot of kind of like surveillance style static shot, wide shots of open areas, the color range, it just like was dark and grimy, a lot of parts, the tension, the unrelenting terror. You just felt you were on this ride with the cast and you cared about them straight away. So it just did so much right. And especially for the time. Now, obviously they say, look, they're not zombies. They've got a rage virus, whatever. I call them zombies, but like they're not zombies in that, like they're not the undead, and a really cool thing in it is that like they starve to death, the people who have the rage virus. So how do you survive the zombie apocalypse in 28 days later? You just outlast the zombies till they all die off. If you can do that, then it contains the virus. I thought that was really interesting take on it. Interesting way to go. And I thought it was brilliant. I'd say I just had a visceral reaction. I remember that walk home that night from the cinema. And it was pitch dark. And like, I don't think I've ever, been on edge as much walking home. So brilliant film.
It's funny, as you were mentioning it, I like my immediate thought was, did this impact you as a filmmaker? And you pretty much said it right at the end of it there, that like it did have that effect on you. And it's really interesting to see a movie like this that have such an impact on the genre, on people in general, because it was like they never made a movie like this before. Not to go off topic, aren't they making like the new movie like fully on iPhones or something like that now, which is like, again, just trying to do something that's a little bit different and just like takes, like it's going to take the whole perspective and make it slightly different. I completely agree. I think it's an excellent movie. I think it's a really good choice. Wasn't even on my list, so I'm happy. Let's keep it up there for now.
28 days later, it's a incredibly innovative experience. I don't think I had that reaction that you had to it, but I respected it. I also thought it was funny that it had a very similar beginning as The Walking Dead. A person wakes up and what the events have already happened. So he walks out and he's just coming up to speed with it. I think they're both actually in a hospital.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they wake up. It's actually, I do need to watch it again. And I love the fact that they're not zombies and it's playing and trafficking with that kind of feeling, but they're doing something unique. And I'm always going to celebrate somebody who tries to do something unique, take a risk. I love a big swing. Like I'm a big fan. Even if something doesn't really work, I'm like, I appreciate the swing. So 100%. Very
Just a
good
little
choice.
thing on that, because like everyone does always talk about it being the Walking Dead similarity. I just double checked here. So 28 Days Later was 2002, and the first publication of Walking Dead was 2003. So it did get out
Wow.
for now. Who had the idea first? Who the hell knows? Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Both brilliant. You know, there's no,
Yeah.
and it's good that people don't get kind of too hooked on that. And the other little
Yeah.
tidbit is everyone always credits, well, not everyone, but people often credit 28 Days Later as having the first fast zombies, but that wasn't. That was Return of the Living Dead in
Mm-hmm.
1985. And they also spoke. So,
Return to the Living Dead was my next movie. You ruined it.
yeah. So just
Yeah.
those little things, but yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah, Return of the Living Dead. I've had this ongoing joke with my brother for decades now, where one of the zombies is trying to convince people to come to him, and he's like, "Come to the hospital," and we always do that little joke. For some reason, that phrase just hasn't left me since I saw it. It was so stupid and absurd. I loved it.
Yeah. Send more, what they say as well, send more paramedics or more ambulances and all the shit like
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
All right, Richie, you're up. What are you nominating?
Okay, I think mine's going to be a little bit more obvious, but I'm just going to get it out there. I think this is a movie that had a huge effect on me because, like as I mentioned, my dad was big into horror. He had this on tape. He made me watch it a bunch of times. It actually, when I first watched it with him, because he was at the point where he started to actually kind of find it a little bit funny, that I didn't really see the proper horror in it until later in life when I started to appreciate what type of movie it was. It's Kubrick's masterpiece. It's The Shining. It's just one of my all-time favorite horror movies for so many different reasons. Like, obviously, from a filmmaking point of view, it's a masterpiece. I think it does a fantastic job of creating this, hounding horror feeling through just the cinematography and music. Now, we don't even have to start about Jack Nicholson's performance because that's stand out on its own. But the way they just captured it, like even the opening scene, the cars going up to the Overlook Hotel, and that music, I can actually hear it in my head right now. And it just, if you were to watch that movie with this sound off, it would not be nearly as impactful as it is. It's like the sound and the shots and those like really long shots where it's winding, where someone's just walking, and it's something very basic, but that music is just like deafening in your ear. You can really feel it. And yeah, because my dad found a lot of scenes funny, so that kind of took away from it. But as I grew up and I realized the true horror that was in this movie, because it's a situation that anybody can relate to, because like you're in this situation where like, they're isolated, they're in this hotel, all this freaky shit's going down. And like when you're a mother and you're a child, who's the one person you're going to look to protect you if shit goes down? And we can all relate to that. We all have parents, we all have guardians, we all have people that have looked after us. And if that person is the person that is actually hunting you down, that has had this, psychopathic turn, it is terrifying. And it's so relatable for that reason, because anyone can say, oh, shit, what if that was my dad and I was trapped in a house with my dad? And that's what makes it so terrifying. And like, I even got the shirt to boost it. So so I nominate The Shining.
That's fantastic. That actually would have been my my one.
Okay.
That's my go-to. Like,
well, you can say your piece on The Shining now if you like it.
Yeah. So like that's one of these things, and I think depending on what's on your list, it's usually if you've seen it at a young age. I think because there's stone cold classics that I saw as an adult and they just didn't resonate with me. And The Shining is one that just never left me. It just barnacled to my hull after I experienced it, because I feel like it is something you experience, and it just resonated throughout pop culture and just culture in general, from like The Simpsons to everything. Like it's just referenced everywhere. And funny enough, the very first film I ever made is called The Hangover. And it's a short film about a person being stalked by their own hangover. And it's just a complete homage to The Shining. Like pure shots, like wardrobe, like the end credits, like it ends with a guy's picture on a bar, in the bar. I'm like, it was just everything. And I was just learning what filmmaking was by doing, because that's how I normally learn, is just by putting my hands in the dough and just creating shapes. And it was, for some reason, it was The Shining that I was just pulling out of it. So yeah, absolute classic. I think me and Richie,
I think as well, like I think there's a lot of things like later on in life I started to look up a lot of like deleted scenes and extra bits, and finding out about like Kubrick and his like a million takes and like the effect that had on the cast and stuff like that. But a clip I saw only recently was them coming up with the shot, from the pantry, like that's looking up at Jack when he's like, go check the snowmobile and the thing. And he's like, go check it out. And it's watching Kubrick come up with that shot just on the fly. Just like, what do I get down on the floor like this? And what if I just go like this? And why did you do it like this? And like Jack Nicholson does that. And I was like, holy shit, like that is one of the most memorable points in the movie. And they just figured it out there and then. So stuff like that, the movie and the impact, the more I find out about the movie from a production point of view, it makes me love it even more. So anyway, I'll talk about The Shining all day. I will stop.
No, it's great. Even if you see these books here, they're by J.W. Rinsler. They're making of books of Alien and Star Wars, and he's written. He sadly passed away, but right before he passed, he wrote the making of The Shining. That's already out as this like 1,500 euro book, but I hear that they're releasing the 100 euro version this November. So like that's going to be incredible, because if there's one film that I want that type of deep dive on, is The Shining. So yeah,
okay,
great choice. Paul, what's your take on Shining?
I didn't pick it because I knew you guys would. So I was like, I saved myself.
Fuck you.
I know. I put it up there. Like, do you know what I mean? Obviously, it has to go there. There's no doubt about that. So, like, the reason I didn't have to prep anything or think about it was like, that's going up. That's a default. I think that is just one of those films that has to be up there. So I don't really have much else to add apart from, I think everyone knows that like Stephen King famously hates it. And I think he was a producer on the TV movie version that I only remember watching on my J1 visa a million years ago, like half watching it in an internet cafe, if you remember what those things were. But I've nothing else to add. You killed it. I mean, the only thing else I'd add is obviously Shelley Duvall passed away recently, and she's phenomenal in it. And I think she went through hell making it. So if it's like Richie's saying, like you get those backstage stories about the making that film. I think the only thing that always kind of gets me is like when I found out someone had a bad time, and I kind of take it she had a bad time on that movie. So I feel bad for her.
You do 200 takes, you're gonna have a bad time.
Jesus, and like unbelievable. Like in a way, it's a miracle the film ever gets made. I think the way those films were made, but no, it's phenomenal, and there's no question it deserves to be up there. So yeah, nothing else to add. Brilliant.
Okay,
all right. So for me, I'm wondering. So I got a couple to go with. So I'm gonna go with one of my obvious choices, and it's gonna be a John Carpenter film, because I feel like depending on how we want to kind of orchestrate this, I just feel like he's gonna have a piece on there. But the question is, which one is it? Because there's lots in his catalog, but I'm gonna go lean towards more of my favorite rather than, because there's always a difference between the best and the favorite. So I'm gonna go with probably one of my favorites, which at the time completely bombed in the box office and also critically got ripped apart. Like, I don't even know how you can take that kind of beating and then turn around later and it's a beloved film that's in the top 5 of lists. And it's like, how did that?
I agree. Big Trouble in Little China should be on the list. Let's do it. Okay. Let's do it. Kurt Russell, come on.
It is Kurt Russell, but it's The Thing. We're going with The Thing here. Absolutely. I was 16 when I first saw it. I moved from Alaska to Ireland, and me and my brother watched it on DVD. And I'll always remember the scene where like the head pops off the body and like tentacles pop out, and my brother turns around to me and goes, "You got to be effing kidding me." And then literally the guy on the screen goes, "You got to be effing kidding me." And it was like this perfect synced moment where we're like, "You got us. Like, you've got us." I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into at the time. I barely heard of it. We were very new into like digging around some of the cult classics, and that one, just from the effects, the tension, the acting, I mean, like it had like everything that I was just completely dazzled by it. And I'll never forget that first experience watching it. So for me, it's 100% like The Thing. I know you can look at Halloween as a seminal piece that was very influential, and that might even bump it out of the bump The Thing out of the Mount Rushmore because of the influence it has. But for me, it's just The Thing is just something I'll always go back to. I'll always have fun with. And That's something I would love to have more making of material on, because there's so many others that are like fully documented.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious about this. It's a remake of another film from I think the 30s or 40s. And
Mm.
it just kind of came out, kind of disappeared, and then was resurrected by fans. And I don't think there's many on this list that you'll actually find that were just destroyed when they came out, and then
Mm.
the fans picked them up and put them on a pedestal.
Mm.
So yeah, for me, it's the thing.
It's terrible that like we live in an era that stuff like that doesn't happen anymore. Like, how many of your favorite movies bombed in the cinema and then got that cult following on video, on DVD, through rental stores, and then ended up like getting its dues and then maybe getting a sequel out of it and stuff like that. Where now we're in this kind of market where like everything goes straight to streaming, everything gets stuck in that, vat with everything else, and like you if something fails, it's just going to fail, and that's it. Like, so it is quite sad to see that you're not going to get these fairy tale stories like a movie like The Thing, kind of, because it's still a movie that people talk about today. Like, and
I went to the
I
cinema
feel
last Halloween to see it. They had
there you
it
go,
on. They
there you
had it
go.
on The View, and we went, and it was
Mm,
kick ass. And like, yeah, that'd be another big fan favorite in this house.
mm.
Is The Thing.
I think as well, like, you think you've said enough on it there, Chris. I think one of probably the best endings to a movie I've ever seen in my entire
Oh
life. It
man.
makes me so happy. Like, I'll say no more. The Thing, let's keep it up there.
All
Yeah.
right.
And again,
Great.
it's one I didn't bother prepping because I knew
Hmm.
someone would say it, because it
Hmm.
has to be
Yeah.
up there. Like it 100% has to be up there. It's incredible film.
Yeah, there's certain ones where it's like they feel obvious, but also if you didn't mention it, it's like you're actively trying to get away from like
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
like
yeah,
what
yeah.
deserves
Yeah.
it. But anyway, I'm very curious. After Paul's first nomination, what is your second nomination,
Mm.
Paul?
But this is one where it's the same year. And it's also a British movie. It's
Oh, interesting.
Dog Soldiers. So Dog Soldiers, again, kind of a beloved movie here. Um, and again, I think it sort of appeals to those same things as 28 Days Later, but there's something tangible about it. There's something simple about the story. It's a bunch of soldiers who are on a training exercise who get tasked with finding some other, soldiers in the woods or something like that. And like they end up in a house, fighting for their lives with werewolves trying to get in the doors, and Neil Marshall was trying to get this film made for 6 years. And originally it was just like, so he just called it Soldiers versus Werewolves. And I love like simple concepts like that. And like there is all those things like, the Asylum make all those movies now, like Mega Shark versus whatever. But what he did with this was he made characters you cared about, characters you could connect with straight away. Like you just you don't even need that much. Like they're all different enough. And even one of the characters is called Bruce Campbell. So, he dies first though. But it's Sean Pertwee is incredible in it. The cast are brilliant. It was low budget movie. I think what was the budget on £2.3 million. It only got released in Brussels and the UK in the cinema, and then the rest was video. And ever since 2002, they've been trying to make a sequel. And the closest they got was, I think, what was it? They did like a promo in 2011 or something like that for like an online web series. But it's one of these kind of like concepts that they've been trying to make again, and they haven't. And I'm sort of glad they haven't, because it kind of sits perfectly. It's of its time. It's
Yeah.
it's like The Thing in that it's all practical. And I love, but what I mean by the practical is like it just has that tangibility to it, and it has that kind of like ruggedness to it. And again, it's sort of unrelenting, and you care about the characters. So when things are going down and people are getting off, you really care about them. But it is one of those films that can truly sit down, and if I come across it, it's on. No matter what, it's one of those films that'll be put on. But no, I love it. It's great.
That's so interesting. You're giving me a list to watch like
Oh, really?
this week
Okay.
and next week. These are the two you mentioned I've seen once each when they came out. I like them both, but I honestly haven't thought about them in a while. So
See, the way I'm approaching this is
I'm
like,
definitely checking out Dog Soldiers like this month. 100%.
I think it's quite important as well. Like, for like, I know this is the very first episode, but like a lot of this stuff, like even if it's stuff that doesn't necessarily make the Mount Rushmore, it's quite important that we get to kind of say our piece and say the things we're passionate about and give these things their dues, like, you know, that kind of
Mm.
way. So like, I really like that you're picking stuff that's like completely left field instead of going for the stereotypical, you know, 6 to 8 movies I think you're going to pick, you know. I've also only seen it once, and I worked in HMV over the years for over 10 years, and every year at Halloween, no matter what price that movie was, it would just automatically go into like the top 10 bestsellers. And I'm
Really?
just like, what the hell? Like, even if it was €4 or 20 quid, people just bought it every year. And I don't know
Wow.
whether it was just people were like, what good horror movies? Or have you seen Dog Soldiers? And they just
Mm.
go and get it and go from there. So it's still having an impact on people, which is great.
So
So
he went
yeah,
on
love
to
it.
make The Descent. I don't know if you've seen The Descent. It's
Yeah.
about
That's
a
it.
group.
That's a
That's
scary movie, man.
that's a better, I suppose, horror movie.
Mhm.
He's all his learnings from the first movie went into that, and like
Yeah.
again, the characters are brilliant, and you care about them all, and the tension is even better. But there's just something,
Mhm.
the charm, nearly like, you know, that kind of way of like the thing is a little bit polished, but
Mhm.
but it still has that charm, that Kurt Russell
Yeah.
charm, and I think that's it. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And The Descent, you're giving me such a list. I'm gonna go to you for film
Okay, okay. Well, look, that's all we
film
watch here. You know.
Our next episode
recommendations for Halloween.
we'll do a Mount Rushmore of movies that Paul recommends.
Yeah. All right, Papa Shango, you're up next.
Okay, so it's one that you've already kind of briefly mentioned. I think that Mount Rushmore for horror movies needs a slasher movie, and like, where do you really go? Do you go with Scream? Do you go with, you know? There's a lot to pick from, but I think with Halloween, like, it's the pioneer of slasher movies. It started everything, whether it's the mask, the knife, you know, the female like protagonist. It's all there, and I just feel like that was just genre defining. It's what you mentioned at the start, Paul. It's a genre defining movie that if that doesn't happen, you don't get Scream, you don't get all of these slasher movies that still happen to this day. So let's just put Halloween on the list, get it out there, because I think it should be at least considered.
Yeah. Funny enough, so as I said before, at the top, like I've been like deep diving into like
Mm,
I think on my letterbox, like horror has been the top category for the past three
mm,
years. And I watched I think it's 1976, it might be earlier, 74, Black Christmas.
mm,
And I was stunned at just how underrated and underappreciated that was, because that came out before Halloween. That's a
mm.
slasher film where somebody is targeting sorority sisters. So I was like, oh wow, so you're
Quite similar.
they're
Yeah.
and he's prank phone calling them as well. I'm
Mm,
going, oh, so you've got Scream in there
mm,
with the
mm,
phone
mm.
call element, but they all credit Halloween as being the one,
Mm,
like the one that kicked it all off. But when I dig a bit deeper, it's like actually there was some before it.
mm,
I will 100% admit it's the most influential.
mm,
And
mm,
I mean, they even what you mentioned, it was also the seasonal activity. Like they
mm,
linked it to Halloween, which
mm,
inspired Friday the 13th
mm,
directly. The producer of Friday the
mm.
13th went, but that worked. What other
Yeah.
spooky date can I claim? And
Yeah.
that's literally Friday the 13th wouldn't exist without Halloween. So
Exactly.
yeah, I
And
think
then when that
influence wise, it's Halloween has the slasher definition.
it was like, yeah, like, and I think if you do have a slasher, like, you know, space on the Mount Rushmore. And when you mentioned the Mount Rushmore of horror movies, the first movie I thought of was Halloween. It's not my favorite horror movie, but that popped into my head straight away. And when that motherfucker sat up like the Undertaker, I really wish I was young enough to be sitting in the cinema to fucking see that and see the reaction to the audience, because that's bigger. I know they had the Jason coming out of the water on Friday the 13th and stuff, and that was obviously a big surprise. But seeing that fucker sit up and that shot of him just doing it right there in the background, like, it'll be with me forever. Like, you know, the Undertaker stole it from the movie. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because when we get to the phase of how we're going to rank it, we're going to have to get into those kind of conversations. Like,
Mm-hmm,
do we really think John Carpenter has two slots on the Mount Rushmore? So one of
yeah.
them has to go. I
Mm-hmm,
love, for me, I'm also kind of curating it by subgenre. Like, I
yeah.
wouldn't even want to have like two creature features as well,
Mm-hmm,
or maybe two like from the same year, like
yeah.
as Paul Butch is swinging over there.
Mm-hmm,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, Halloween, it's so difficult to ignore the impact that it had.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan. Like even last Halloween, myself, my brother, and my wife rewatched it, and my wife doesn't watch horror films, and she was very silent during the experience of that.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I'm not sure I really enjoy what's happening to me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also just a masterclass in simplicity. And the older I get, and as a screenwriter, a filmmaker as well, like I'm really embracing simplicity, like stripping it down to like its pure essence, and then going, what resonates out of this? And even the soundtrack alone is like an amazing moment of like this is simplicity at its finest, and it resonates and it creates a memory to it.
There's a great clip of I can't remember the actor's name that played the doctor, and it's him getting interviewed in between takes, and he's basically just like cutting a promo on John Carpenter. He's like, I've no idea what the fuck is going on. I don't know what this script is. This is basically dog shit. It's just like I just love hearing things like that, because like this is another movie that probably should have failed.
Yeah.
Do you know
I
that
like it a lot, but like it's interesting that like he did want to turn it into an anthology series like every year, but I think he got forced to make the second one still with Michael Myers, but then he got to do 3 Season of the Witch and wanted it to be, look, it will have a Halloween movie every year, but it's a different genre.
Yeah.
Then Season of the Witch obviously didn't do very, very well, part 3, so but they had to go back to the well,
Is there a movie franchise that has more timelines than Halloween? Because it is actually ridiculous. They restart that timeline so many times to go from like the first movie straight into something, the first 2 movies straight into something. It's crazy. We'd actually look up the timelines. Like one of them goes straight from
H20 or something as well.
Yeah,
Remember that?
I think that was straight from the second movie straight into the H20 or H2O, whatever it's called.
H2O.
H2O.
There's a
isn't
point
that
of
isn't that
contention.
ironic?
H2O or it's 20 years
H2O.
after, it's 20 years after the first movie. So I thought it was meant to be H20.
No, I think it was actually marketed like, and they even in the trailers say H2O.
Serious?
But it's supposed to be Halloween 20. It's both.
Yeah.
It's ironic though that like we even celebrate the simplicity of the first one and how it led to the complexity of the sequels. It's like you completely overanalyze this concept.
Or they beat it into the ground.
About a fun fact about it too. So it's set like it's supposed to take place in Illinois, but I think it was actually filmed in California. And they wanted to make it look like October, but there was no leaves on the ground. So they actually had bags of leaves that they'd run to each location, and in front of the screen they would cover the ground with leaves. They would film, they'd scoop up all the leaves, and they would actually be very particular about getting all the leaves because they don't have that many of them. So they would be like arguments on their set of like, oh, get the leaves, get the leaves. We got to use them for the next shot. And I just love that. Like, I love how simple that is. And when you watch it, like, it's well done. I never think that it's not where they say it is. But when I learned that they've actually just take bags of leaves and they pour it on the ground, I think it's delicious. So for my nomination, I'm going to go with 1968, Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby. Like for me, that's a top 10 in general, not just horror, but like a top 10 film in general. And I think it's kind of one of those ones. And if you kind of curate the Mount Rushmore, I'm kind of going more into the cult of the satanic. And I think that kind of gets its representation. And that's a seminal one that really influenced a lot of the ones that came after it. And also I think there's a term I don't like, which is called elevated horror. I don't like the term because it kind of suggests that it's above the other films, but it definitely represents a pinnacle for them. And I read the book too. So whereas The Shining is fantastic and nothing like the book, Rosemary's Baby is identical to the book. Like when I read that, I couldn't believe how perfectly adapted it was. And I really respect a filmmaker who can actually just get out of his own way and go, this works. So there's not much I'm going to actually change here. I'm just going to embrace it and translate it for the screen. So for me, it's a great film because it has like that slow burn tension that kind of builds gradually. Like I bet if somebody wrote that now, they would send it to script competitions and reviews and they say, oh, get to it by page 15. These guys don't, because they just want you to get invested with these characters and then get to a scenario where you're questioning what is real, what is not. Is Rosemary actually seeing these things, or is it not? Like, is it in her mind, or
Mm.
is
Yeah.
it reality? And I think it was just a master in doing that. So for
Mm.
me, Rosemary's Baby, I'm not sure it'll make the collective Mount Rushmore, but for me, I just think it was just a staggering achievement whenever I watched it. And I rewatched it a couple of years ago, twice, because after I watched it, I went, okay, a couple months later, I gotta get in there again
Yeah.
because it's an absolute treat.
Love
I'd
it.
agree.
Love the passion. Absolutely love it.
I'd agree it's a masterpiece. And again, it was will I, won't I pick that movie? But then I thought someone else would
Mm.
probably pick it. This is my whole day is categorized by knowing you guys will pick other films so I don't have to.
Yeah. Stop
And
coming in with a fucking game plan. What the
yeah,
hell,
yeah,
man?
yeah. Well, it's to spread it, get as many movies in as we can. Because like
Okay.
I feel like it is one of those movies like The Shining, The Thing you can't resist picking up on. You know, it's an like we keep saying it's an all-time classic, and it is, and it felt like there's very little horror in a sense in it. There's like all this dread and mistrust and paranoia and fear and anxiety, like, and it's able to pull in all those emotions, and the performances are incredible again, and like you're able to feel all those things, but like, and it's creepy stuff happening, sort of, but like there's very lit, like there's no gore, there's nothing like that, you know,
Yeah.
the main things you'd think of, you know. And it like it is timely you mention it, Chris, because like Apartment 7A is the prequel movie, which is just coming out or come out. I haven't seen it.
No, I've never even heard of that. What?
Yeah,
Is it a prequel?
it's a prequel, serves as a prequel, yeah. So the
Oh
Apartment
wow.
7A, so it could be back in the zeitgeist, I don't know, but no, look, it's an incredible film. So it would definitely be up there, if not on the mount, beside it.
Oh wow.
You know,
I'm
We'll have to
surprised
see.
that
We
like
will have to
I th
see.
I thought you guys would be like, oh yeah, I remember
no,
that from years ago.
Mhm.
That's impressive. Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's actually one that um it's 68. It feels so fresh. I get it. I understand like modern audiences or even modern producers would
Mm.
actually be like, well, it's weird because like I know a lot of like producers out there that would love that film, but then if they read a script that like so I've written something similar and I actually intentionally went, look, it'll the first act's a bit longer to kind of get the characters, and they were like, no, let's get to it fast. I'm like, no, I don't agree. I think get into caring about the character, and
Mm.
once you invest that time into them, then it's compelling what happens to them. Similar to
Yeah.
like how I have to watch Dog Soldier again, but given that frenetic pace, they've done something where you actually care about these characters very
Yeah.
quickly. That's super interesting because normally you kind of want to get into their life, and then when you take it away, the audience know what the stake was that they took away. I think
Mm.
that film just really had a great job in just going, we're taking our time and you're with us. And I totally just appreciated
Yeah.
what they did. And even some of the cinematography, now that I think of it, they'd have these unique moments where the camera was slightly off, where like there's framed through a doorway and it kind of makes you as a viewer want to like lean to a
Mm.
side to see past the doorway. And I was like,
Mm.
that is just incredible. What a
Mm.
decision that is. So
Mm.
yeah, that's Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
Paul, let's do one more round. What do you think?
Okay.
One more circle around. So
Mm.
Paul, what are you nominating next from that
Okay.
exact
Okay.
same year?
No, well, not, I
Another
was
British
wondering.
movie.
I know. Well, actually, it's a British filmmaker. Let's see. I go. Oh, okay. There's
You
one
got to
more.
type, my friend. You got to type.
Okay, it's a toss up. Okay, Joe, what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go for 30 Days a Night. So it's not a bit different. It wasn't what I was gonna go for now. I'm
Mm.
flipping it now. So it's a 30 Days a Night. So what am I doing? I got a zombie. I got a werewolf. I got a vampire. So I've got all my monsters in. So I'm
Mm.
throwing in the
Mm.
monsters. We've got the Thing. Okay, it's more monsters, right?
Creature feature, yeah.
Creature feature. So look, I think 30 Days a Night is an all-time classic. It's based on a comic book. It's set in a town called Burrow in Alaska. The idea that vampires come to this town knowing that like they can survive in the nighttime for 30 days and just have a great time killing and feeding for 30 days undisturbed. I think it's got like standout performances from Josh Hartnett and Melissa George. The brilliant chemistry together. Danny Houston plays a wonderful villain. They have the vampire language, they have the vampire traditions, the way of behaving. They feel otherworldly, but they feel familiar. They, the prosthetics on the face, but their clothing is human. They have a kind of a familiar, I suppose is what you'd call him, who kind of comes into town at the beginning of the film. He ends up in jail. He's cut all the phone lines and the communications routes. The town is completely isolated. Um, in a little bit of research for this, I did find out that it's not 30 days a night. It's actually 66 or 67 days a night, which doesn't sound as good, but actually will be even more terrifying. You have to wait twice as long to take out these vampires. But it is just again, and I kind of think that that's the trend going through my picks, is these survival movies of unrelenting terror. How do you cope in this insane situation? In 28 Days Later, how do you wake up and cope with this insane situation? Dog soldiers, you're out on a kind of like a training mission. You find dead other soldiers in the forest. Werewolves exist. What? Okay, we got to deal with it. I'm going about my life in this tiny Alaskan town. Josh Hartnett is the sheriff. He's broken up with Melissa George. There's some tension there, but still love between them. Oh shit, vampires are here. How do I deal with this? And it's like, how can we survive, and how do we hide, and how do we keep quiet, and how can we defeat them? And it's just a wonderful, like, just nearly exhausting film. I think it's brilliant on every level.
Well, like,
I'll have to.
I can tell you,
I'll have to put the hand up here before you say anything. I have not seen this movie,
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to trust you guys completely on this. And not, I know the movie very well. I just haven't seen it.
Okay, cool.
yeah, again, another one I've seen once, but it's going on my list to rewatch because I haven't thought about it in a while. I'm from Alaska, so I love the concept, and I can attest to, there's more than 30 days where it's pitch black. Like, you'd wake up in the morning and it's dark outside. You get on the bus to school, it's dark outside. There's probably a little bit of light while you're in class, and then once you're out again, it's dark outside. It's a fantastic premise. Like, what a fantastic premise. I do question how many people they're actually going to be, what the choice is available in Burrow, Alaska, because Alaska has a very small population. It reminds me of this phrase that the women have when they talk about the men in Alaska, that the odds are good, but the good are odd. So it's like there are a lot of men, but there's a bit of screws loose here. In the
But they
like,
have some of those characters there, that kind of way. They've got the guy who's always
you have to
a mess,
like,
or this or that, or eccentric.
They exist up there. Like, great pick though. Like, we got a vampire film in there for sure. I love that premise a lot. Like, it's one of those ones. It's the elevator pitch one where you hear it in like one sentence. You go, I got it. And I know exactly what that is. But yeah, that Bush is just coming with the rewatch.
The curveballs, coming with the curveballs.
but the movies I've rewatched and rewatched, I could always watch them. That kind of way. Whereas like some of the kind of the more intellectual ones, sometimes you're like, it's a bit too smart tonight. I need escapism, and I think these give it to you.
Wonderful. Well, since Rich hasn't seen that film, I guess we'll take it from there.
The next one I wanted to say was one that probably hasn't aged the best, but definitely had an impact on me as a child, and that's Nightmare on Elm Street. And I know now it's seen as a very much of a kind of a joke, the way the franchise went, and the way like you show that to like a teenager now, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? That's hilarious, because obviously it's been it's been done so many times as Rick and Morty and The Simpsons, stuff that everyone's kind of portrayed that premise. But if you think about it at its core, what that is, it's an excellent villain. And it's an unbelievable concept. The whole idea of like sleep, someone getting you while you're asleep, it's so relatable. And I think it changes your whole perception on fear and what fear actually is. So that whole concept I just thought was so unique and works really well still to this day. And then the villain is just so ridiculous and so outrageous. Like, guy can like kill you in the most sadistic ways, but like, use a pun on the way out the door while he's doing it. Now, obviously, that has aged really badly now, but I think at the time, I think the impact that that particular movie, especially the first one, and that was one of the ones, Chris, that you had mentioned about going into the video store, where I'd walk up and look at the cover of Nightmare on Elm Street and like be talking to my friends about this movie. And like we would just like let our imagination go crazy because maybe somebody's seen it or somebody's uncle's seen it. And you hear things about scenes and things that happen. And you're so terrified of the like even just the idea of this movie even before you watch it. I don't think I watched it until I was like a teenager, like to be honest, because I was so terrified. Like, and obviously it didn't live up to the expectation I'd built in my head. But I think as far as Mount Rushmore goes, the impact, and I think if you were to pick a Mount Rushmore of actual characters and faces to go, like Freddy Krueger would be there like straight away, like, you know. So it wouldn't be one of my favorite, but I think it's so iconic, it just needs to be put out there.
Yeah. So actually, funny enough, when I was telling you about the video store, I specifically was thinking about Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not sure which one because I remember like that experience I did with lots of the covers, but picking up that and looking at the back, there's this stark memory of Freddy's giant head as he's halfway eating a girl in bed. And I'm just like, I don't know what is going on, but I hear my parents yelling yelling my name, trying to get me back. I'm like, okay. And I put it back. And like that one in particular, I was just dazzled by it going, what is going, like, what is this? Like, I don't understand what is happening on this back cover here. But yeah, look, it's definitely one of the more modern figures of horror. So you've had your Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, and that's more of that kind of that new resurgence and the new surgence of the Michael Myers, the Freddy Krueger, the Jason, and they kind of exist in that new phase, the new generation of horror, I suppose, from the 80s. Yeah. I actually agree though. Like I saw that even when I was a bit younger, and I actually was wishing it held up better, or like even at that time, I was like, oh, that's what that is. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. I was like, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe for some reason, from my vantage point, it didn't live up to the expectations I built. But I was also a child staring at that cover for years, and I don't think it ever would have matched what was in my head, to be honest.
So I've still never seen it, bizarrely, and I sort of know why I've never seen it. So it's like when I was a kid, when I'd walk home from school, I think we were like 8, and my friend had seen it, and he would tell me all about it. And it's like that thing of like, when you hear it, the concept is so terrifying. It's like he gets you in your sleep. Maybe it was like 7. And like you have to sleep. So there's no escape. And that's fascinating. Like, no, there's no other kind of villain like that, you know. So it brings up all those kind of things, and then he can do anything to you in your sleep. You're in the dream realm or whatever it is. So yeah, it's terrified the shit out of me as a kid. Like the very concept, and you see an image and the claw. And I think in the first movie, the first 1 or 2 movies, like that, you go in the video store, you see the cover. It was quite gory, and I know he became more of a kind of a jokey character as it went on with the puns and all that kind of stuff. I don't think they were so much there in the first film. It was a bit more. No. You know, straight and gory and terrifying and mad and stuff. So like, yeah, just kind of like, but like that, you hear so much about it over the years. It's one of those movies you feel you've seen even though you haven't seen it. And bizarrely, I haven't seen it. I've seen
weirdly you probably don't need to see it. I know.
No. Like I nearly don't want to. I nearly want to kind of let it live as this amazing thing in my head and not see it, because I've seen like bits of other ones and bits of it, and famously Freddy versus Jason, which I love. You know, Jason Voorhees fighting Freddy. I love that movie, and I love Jason X as well. It's a great movie, Jason in Space. But no, I haven't seen it. But you're 100% right. If there's a Mount Rushmore of movie, what was it, slasher movie guys or whatever, like that face has to be up there.
Even just faces, even just the faces. Like
I think the claw. He had 2 things. He had the claw and the face.
Yeah, if I was just designing the actual mount and it didn't have any significance other than just visual aesthetic, I'd put Freddy on it straight away.
Yeah, it's
funny too because the title is a great title, Nightmare on Elm Street, I did always think though, because they stuck with Elm Street. I was like, I'm not sure. I wonder what would happen. They may have had discussions of changing the street because they instead they went all in on like it has to be that street, and
Hmm.
they stayed with the name, and that puts them in that location. And it's like you could have freed them up creatively if they just changed the street name and it was a nightmare
Mm,
on Oak Street or whatever, like
mm,
and
mm,
then there's
mm.
like, look, we can go wherever we want with this, and Freddy is like find a new victim. But they
Yeah.
really went with that's the house. The house has
Mm,
significance. Let's stick without. So I've always thought that was
yeah.
a curious take. Right or wrong, who knows? But I wonder if
Mm,
there was conversations about can we just change the street and then just give us creative
yeah.
freedom to go anywhere in the world, and then
Mm,
we find new people to terrorize because he lives in the dream world, so he doesn't need to be geo-targeting a specific location in
yeah.
real
Yeah.
life.
But
All
isn't it
right.
always like these movies, they start with like one simple concept, like it's really clear, defined concept, and it's like, better make a sequel. But the pool of what you're pulling from is so simple
Mm,
and small
mm,
that like it's like you're just watering it down the whole time. You know, it like how do you keep that going? Like why does he need to towards
yeah.
it? Like for Freddy, like my understanding is it was a personal vendetta. That's what brought him back. That was the hook. That's
Mm,
why he was anchored to those people. So you keep going. It's like, why is he coming back? Why is he coming back? It doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
He's one of the seminal characters that invented that never-ending sequel itis that happened in our
Mm,
in the genre itself,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so for my last pick, I was actually gonna go with Psycho. Like I was so locked in to be like, let's go with Psycho. You got to go with like one of
are
those,
we
like
going
it.
like 1998 Vince Vaughn Psycho, or are we
Yeah,
going?
of
Oh yeah. Oh,
course.
okay. Okay. Okay.
Shot
Good.
for
Good.
shot
Good.
Yeah.
remake.
Okay. I just
No,
want to put Vince
it's
Vaughn's face in the memory.
yeah, it's like I don't know. I was like so ready to be like, yeah, this. Let's do this. However, I'm gonna swerve now and take one that wasn't on my list, but like I absolutely love, and it's The Omen. Like
Mhm.
that film, I actually showed it last year to my brother, and it was the first time he's seen it, and it was one another film where I haven't seen it in years, so I watched it. I was like, oh gosh, all right. So hey, Paul, I go check this out. So Halloween shows up around the season of it. He comes to town and I show him this, and he doesn't know anything about it. So that one moment with the head, like he was just like, I don't know
Mm,
what to do. But all like it has all of those moments
mm,
because there's a scene with the priest running, and then it's kind of referenced in Hot Fuzz as well, but
mm,
outside the church. And it's kind of this film where it's terrifying. It's got this haunting loud crashing chanting soundtrack to it. The plot is really fun. I'm kind of trafficking in the Rosemary's Baby, is it real or is it not kind of
mm,
world
mm,
again. But it was just it was just such a classic when I watched it, and rewatching it recently with someone who hasn't seen it was just delightful to see
Mhm.
mm, mm.
somebody just react exactly when the filmmaker wants you to react, and just go like that's never leaving your mind, like that's now just stuck with you, because even the concept of like the photographer takes a photo and then there's like something that's like coming towards them in the photo, but it's
Mm,
reminiscent of what's going to eventually kill them, and
mm,
just that alone like you can do so much with. So yeah, like it's just such a great film. I love the premise. I love the execution. The
mm,
acting is wonderful, and yeah, I think it just stands up. Like even production wise, like the haircuts are a little dated, like the clothing, but like you sit anybody down and they're like locked in and they get it, and just such an original concept. So yeah, The Omen.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
throwing that in.
Ooh. It feels
I
like
really
it's in
like
that realm of the like the other big one that none of one's mentioned yet, like The Exorcist. It's like it is another iconic religious. We haven't had a religious horror movie yet. That's our first.
Yeah.
Well, actually, sorry, Rosemary's Baby is
Yeah.
demonic, and this is
Yeah, yeah.
also demonic. So Chris, yeah, you're going for demonic films.
I know, and
Yeah.
I nearly went Psycho because when we get to the curation, that's going to be a big point of view for me, is if we're
Mm,
doubling up on a certain topic. That's why I
Mm,
was like, okay, slashers I can actually cover with
mm,
Psycho.
mm,
So that's why I was like, well, Halloween or Psycho. And I was like, that's why The Thing kind of
Yeah.
took its place. But I don't know.
I think Psycho is
I'm
probably
just
another one
I'm in
that,
the ring and I'm listening to the audience. I'm
yeah,
calling in the ring, Richie. And
calling
I
it on
just
the
went,
fly.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna go
think
with
I
the
think
Omen.
Psycho definitely did like redefine the horror like genre the same way a lot of these other movies did, and I think it definitely does need to be in the conversation. And I think the Omen as
Mhm.
well. I absolutely love the Omen. The Omen had a very similar impact on me. I really enjoyed that. Growing up, still like it now. I actually like some of the sequels as well, to be perfectly honest. So
They're
yeah,
great. Yeah.
let's keep the
Sequels are
Omen up there.
genuinely
Yeah,
great, which is
yeah,
the
they're good. Yeah,
opposite of
yeah,
Friday the 13th and
yeah,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Halloween and all the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
recently watched again, like I for the past few years I've been like really jumping into the genre and I went through the Omen ones and I was like, these are actually pretty good. I was like, wow, I did not
Uh,
know. It's good to
Also,
know.
just while it was mentioned there, because I thought it was going to come up, I don't like The Exorcist. I think it's too gory. I never really got
Gory.
the idea of it. I don't, just something, like just something kind of sick about it or something like that. And I just like, I had this whole build up, and it actually had the opposite effect of like this movie that's supposed to be the most terrifying and scary movie of all time. It's scarier than any movie. And I remember when it came out on like DVD for the first time, there was this big thing where it's like the scariest movie of all time has come out, and I just never really got it, to be honest.
Hmm.
Like that's a personal preference. It's just not for me.
I
Nothing
can
What do
about
you
it I
see,
think?
really like.
but I can see that happening because I'm the same with Alien. Like, I bizarrely didn't see Alien till I was like fucking 30 or something.
Mm.
But I saw all the other Alien movies, and I think
What
it's
the
that
fuck
thing
is
of
wrong with
like,
you?
yeah, I know. It's like I didn't see it till really late, and I don't know why that was, but it's like I think once I think Alien works when you've seen it first, and then you see the
Mm.
other movies. But when you've seen the other movies, and then you see Alien One, it has doesn't
Yeah,
have
it's
that
very
tension,
different.
that
Yeah.
experience. I think Exorcist is one of those. I think I saw it late. I think I watched it in college, drunk or something,
Mm.
and like I didn't really remember it that well. And
Mm.
then I saw it in a drive-in properly. It was really good experiencing the
Yeah.
drive-in, but I was struck by how much of the film was set in kind of the normal world. It wasn't, they were
Hmm.
going, well, is she mentally ill? Is she this? We're sending her for, MRIs and CAT scans, and we're trying to figure it
Hmm.
out. And it's only like the
Yeah.
back end of the movie is the exorcism. But like, I would say that The Exorcist 3 is probably better than Exorcist, but you sort of need to see The Exorcist to
Yeah.
understand The Exorcist 3. But I think Exorcist 3 is probably a better film.
I also
Um,
think The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a better exorcism movie than The Exorcist. I find.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
I actually enjoyed that more.
But we're not short of
Right.
exorcism films in this world anymore. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, there you go.
Russell Crowe knocked out two this year.
How? How?
So,
Well, Richie, I actually have the exact same experience with The Exorcist. But that kind of ties back to what I was saying before about how if you watch something when you're younger, it leaves an impression on you, it imprints on you. But when you see something when you're older, it doesn't really work. And
mm,
I watched The Shining, and that resonated with me
Mm.
forever. And then I watched The Exorcist when I was
Mm.
older, and I just went, okay. But a
Yeah.
friend of mine was like The Exorcist to him is like the scariest. Then I showed him The Shining and he went, okay. I was like, what do
Yeah.
you mean? Okay, like look at
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Like,
Like.
what's the dog costume and the
Mm.
waiter doing in that room? Like,
Yeah.
what are they doing? What they don't tell you. What are they
Hey, that's the
doing?
best part, man. Well,
Little
that actually
pre-date
applies
party.
to the same thing applies to Halloween. Like the very first time my dad put Halloween on video, I sat at the bottom of the stairs and I did not get through the opening credits because the music was so terrifying. And like
Wow.
that's when these things get introduced to you at a younger age, I think they do have that much more of an impact.
I totally agree.
That's
Like
for sure.
Halloween is the same for me. I saw it, I think late. I saw it as an adult in the cinema.
Mm.
I didn't find it scary at
Yeah.
all. It dragged a lot in parts,
Mm.
which is I hate saying that, but like I appreciate what it did at the time. But
Yeah.
I think I remember saying try making that now. It
Hmm.
just would not like, but it had all the pieces. It was the first to
Yeah.
do it, and
Yeah.
that's why it works. So I think it's that thing. If you see it young or you see it at the time and it's brand
Yeah.
new, it's incredible. But
And
watching it as
I'm
an
actually quite
adult,
happy as we're kind of wrapping up here. I'm actually quite happy that we covered kind of those ones that are glaringly obvious, like The Exorcist and Psycho and stuff like that. I don't think you can really make a Mount Rushmore without even like at least considering those movies. Even if they're not our favorites, they should be at least mentioned in some way. There's another one I kind of wanted to mention as well, which isn't wouldn't be one of my picks, but I think it should be talked about a little bit, is Poltergeist. I don't know how you guys feel about Poltergeist, but
Love
that
Poltergeist.
was that was one that had a huge impact on me, because the idea of just a haunted house and the girl and that iconic like their hairline, and you can kind of feel like, I don't know whether he wrote the whole thing or he's just one of the writers, but you can really feel that kind of Spielberg feel off it as well. I feel like I'm watching ET in parts of it as well. The way like the home, and it just feels a lot like, I know it's of that era, early 80s and stuff like that. But I just think, as far as a haunted house movie go, with a lot of twists and turns and crazy visual effects for its time and stuff like that, I think that's something that should be at least mentioned briefly, even if it doesn't make the final list.
Do you want to know a fun fact about that, Richie?
Mhm.
E.T. was originally going to be a horror film, and it was going to be about aliens invading a family house. And while throughout the process, and if you go online, you can actually see the creatures that they created for it. Very much what you see of ET, but they look mean and evil. And then along the way, Spielberg changed his mind and he converted it into the family-friendly adventure. And then Poltergeist came out of what the ET original was supposed to be. So it's amazing how you
feels
felt
like
there was a
ET.
connection there.
It does, yeah.
The DNA of ET became Poltergeist.
Yeah.
That's incredible that you picked up on that without actually knowing it. All right, so I think we're done with our nomination round, and I think now we're probably going to get into curating our actual Mount Rushmore. It is going to be tough though, because there's a ton left to add in.
Yeah.
Like, I was really wanting to go, maybe I'll bring in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm not sure I can squeeze that into this conversation. But I think we actually have to now move on to the curation. And there might be a couple of surprises that we pull out of the bag. It doesn't have to be the ones that we just nominated. So what have we actually done so far? Richie, would you be able to let us know the list?
Yeah, we have a list so far. So we've got 28 Days Later, The Shining, The Thing, Dog Soldiers, Halloween, Rosemary's Baby, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Omen, and then we kind of threw in at the end Psycho, Exorcist, and Poltergeist, just to kind of have them there for consideration. And there, as you said, there is so many. Like, you jump into the zombies, a franchise. You've got like Dawn of the Dead and all those great movies. But like, when you're looking at that list, like, there's so many we could mention. We could talk for another hour about movies that could potentially be added to this list. But I think what we've got is pretty secure, unless Paul has some more curveballs or anything.
No. Like, not at all. No, but I'd echo that. But I think, like, as we started out with horror, it's so big. I think a Mount Rushmore of horror, unless you got into like your subgenres, I think it's a near impossible task, because like anyone listening to this or watching this will be going, "You idiots! There's this film and this film and this film," and it's like it's a hugely passionate fan base as well, horror fans. So like, look, hands up, we did our best in the time we have. I think if you want to do this right, your podcast would have to be a month long, and no tea breaks. Just keep going.
I would like to say as well, like that, like, anyone that does watch this podcast, and once we get to the end of this is the definitive list of the best horror movies of all time. Right?
You trolled him now. He's playing heel. He's playing heel.
You can go on to like at the Mount Rushmore on Twitter and Instagram, and you can tell me what you feel. But this is it. This is the definitive list. It's going to be in writing. So what can I say?
Okay. We'll make a graphic. Therefore, it's real. We'll put make a fake plaque. It's all right.
The champ spoke. What can we say? 400 days and counting. Yeah. Makes total sense. So, yes, there is so many different ways you can go about this. I still like the idea that there's a couple of parameters, like you wouldn't have the same filmmaker twice. If we've got a subgenre covered, like is the next, if you have two of the same type, like, are they really justified, or are we like leaving a commentary for horror out of the list? So
like, I think a really good example with that is, like, I don't think, like, maybe both of them don't make it, but you wouldn't have Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. They're too similar, like, in the terms of like they're in that slasher genre kind of space. So like that's just one of the examples of it's either one or the other in that case. Like, same with probably Rosemary's Baby and Omen. I think they are quite similar in that sense. So if one of them makes it, I don't think the other does.
Yeah, I agree.
We're also like
Absolutely.
my picks are always kind of like not classic horror monster, but modern
Yeah.
classic horror monster. You've got a zombie, a
Mhm.
werewolf, and
Yeah.
a vampire movie. So I don't know. I don't really feel you'd pick a vampire and a werewolf movie and a
Mhm.
zombie movie. Zombie
Yeah.
fans hating me right now, calling 28 Days Later a zombie movie.
I'm
But yeah, I think
I'm
it's
just gonna say right off the bat, The Shining has to be there. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Just saying. We might as
okay.
well just lock that in right now. That's our George Washington. Just get him in. Just get him up there. Just get it done. Like there's no point even questioning that. Like
Yeah,
are we
go with
happy
that.
with that?
Yeah, yeah, go with
Okay.
that. Go
Oh,
with that.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
If not,
100%.
then I'm gonna scream. So like, just
Oh,
be
Scream. We
prepared.
never even talked about Scream. Let's add
Oh,
Scream
Jesus,
to the
like,
list.
Dawn of the Dead, Night of the
yeah,
Living
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
I
You
Yeah.
know.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Romero's not actually been even mentioned in this, which feels like a
Yeah.
I
travesty.
was
Like I
surprised. I think
know
I was
reviewers are
counting on you
screaming at us.
guys. Yeah, I was counting on you guys to bring him up. Like I
we
counted on you for everything else.
so we've got Shining. Where do we go
So go with
from
that.
there?
Well, why don't you like so say it's okay, so Shining feels like it's in its own space. So say you look at what do we say? The Omen and what else was in the same space?
Rosemary's
Rosemary's
Baby.
Baby.
Rosie's Baby, Wildcard
Kind
will throw
of
in
playing in
Exorcist,
the
Exorcist 3, that demon space.
yeah, the demonic,
Yeah.
Mhm.
supernatural,
Like one I was gonna throw in
religious
was
vibe.
what you call it? Event Horizon. Space
Oh,
Demon.
such a good fucking movie. Oh my
Yeah, yeah.
God.
That's the Shining in space, though, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
And it's a bit more gory. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
Yeah,
I that was my demon pick was
yeah, yeah.
right.
Oh,
Event
what a
Horizon.
pull. What a pull.
So so if you're picking your demon space, what's your demon space movie? Or not space, but your demon world movie?
All right. Um, so I'm still like, I still think there's like Rosemary's Baby just has
Mm.
it's got class too, you know, like it's got
Yeah.
prestige to it. I know I don't like the term elevated horror, but it has that kind of that rank
Hmm.
to it where
Hmm.
it doesn't rely on the gore, the slashes. It's
Mm.
very
Hmm.
psychological and it's
Hmm.
very character based. So I think if you're curating the list, it sits on its own pedestal, like, and it has enough personality and prestige
Hmm.
to it that you can still then get
Yeah.
representation from other ones as well.
Hmm.
And the Omen has a bit of that, but it does bring a lot of the gore, the decapitations, quite a bit of
Yeah.
mutilation and dog carnage. So
Hmm.
I think, I mean, we're kind of sharing the same space if you kind of move into that
Mm.
realm. Like Shining and Omen have commonality, and probably other ones on this list with violence. I
Hmm.
have it too. Whereas Rosemary's Baby just comes in with a different feel to it and
Hmm.
a very a maturity to it that should have representation in our Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Okay. We're making a classy list here, boys. Classy
I
Hmm.
like
list.
it.
And
Yeah,
Highbrow.
yeah.
let's trash it up a little bit.
Absolutely. I want some trash. Quick,
Well, it's
quick.
also I love that it's not not like Paul Bush who's like circling the same 2 years every time. It's like we got 1980 and 1968
Yeah,
already. Like
yeah.
that's fantastic because I don't
Okay.
like to
Yeah.
just go like it's I was born this year, so what I watched that came out in the chronology
Yeah.
of my childhood is what's represented. Like
Okay, we're
I'm a
covering the
big fan of that.
decades. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in future episodes, I'll be a champion of like just going back in time and current stuff and really want to shape it with all types of filmmakers. So we've got The Shining and Rosemary's Baby. I'm
Mm.
thinking a another one to represent is Creature Features, though, right? Like that is like an absolute staple. So what is the monster movie of the month? That kind of representation that we want to have curated onto our mound. Or as Richie was saying, chiseling in the
Hmm.
face of
Hmm.
a creature. What does that creature look like?
Yeah,
Mm.
I think you're kind of limiting yourself as well, though, because you've kind of got like all those movies that are like those genre-defining movies, like Halloween, Psycho, Nightmare on Elm Street. I really feel like one of those movies that had that impact and still has that impact kind of deserves a place as well.
Mm.
So we kind of backing ourselves into a corner by because we already have two picks. I feel like one of those three movies deserves a place on the list just because of that impact. We all talked
Mm.
about from all of those types of movies, like not really with Psycho, but we kind of know the impact that had on films in general with you know, the twist of the main character getting killed early. They did it again in Scream and stuff like that. Like all of that stuff being done was never kind of done before. I feel like that kind of movie that was shared on the school ground, and we saw the VHSs, and I think Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and all those guys. I think one of those definitely deserves a place on the list somewhere as well. I'm getting very conflicted about what to do here.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. It's
Yeah.
like Chris, you mentioned the creature feature, and what jumped to my mind straight away was Monster Squad, like a kiddie
Okay.
horror movie. I don't know if you ever
Wolfman's
saw-
got nerds.
Yeah, like Chris, have you seen Monster Squad?
I have, yeah. Only
That-
recently,
oh,
actually.
yeah.
in the past-
Superb.
That's an
past 2 years.
Yeah, superb movie. Like it has all your classic horror movie monsters in it. You know, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, the Wolfman, all that kind of stuff. Like it's
What an idea.
fucking awesome movie,
Yeah.
and like very much an 80s movie. The language and what's said in it, especially one of the opening scenes, I was like, had to do a double take. I watched it again as an adult, and I was like, what are they saying? A great movie. I think, like, if we're talking monsters, I'm gonna get a bit selfish. I'll go, look, my 3 picks were all sort of more modern monster takes, maybe. I don't mind if it's any of them, but I think we do need to have some sort of like zombie or werewolf or vampire movie on this.
I feel actually Chris is leaning towards maybe throwing the thing in there. I don't know whether that's the direction you're kind of going in with your creature.
I think
features.
I think the thing transcends that a little bit, because it's more. The thing is like. The thing is scary.
Is it more than a horror movie?
It is, because it's the paranoia of them against each other. So it's more than a monster movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's always
like
what
the
makes
psychological
it good.
type of
Yeah. The enemy is within. Who is the enemy? It's a paranoia film. It's
That's
not
interesting.
it's not really about the monster. And like I always think like a good zombie film isn't about the zombies. They're just like something that causes something to happen. But really the thing is about the people against each other, really, or the paranoia that they feel. And I think
like the thing definitely made my list when I was making up my original list, but it wasn't the first movie I thought of when I thought of a horror movie.
Yeah.
Right.
It's definitely thing now would be, I didn't bring it up because I knew someone would bring it up, but it would be on my Mount Rushmore now.
That's interesting that it transcends horror. Because like you have mentioned before with Spielberg and Jaws, and I don't consider that horror because that's my favorite film of all time.
Do you know what?
So
I had a whole spiel ready for one of you motherfuckers said Jaws. I had a promo. I'm actually so disappointed I couldn't say, because the exact words I was going to say was, just because Brock Lesnar can do a shooting star press doesn't mean it should be on the Mount Rushmore of cruiserweight wrestlers. Yeah. And I was going to make exactly the same comparison about, just because you've got a creature, just because it has scary elements, it's not a motherfucking horror movie. I'm sick of people saying it. It's not a horror movie.
No.
I'd probably put it on the Mount Rushmore of greatest movies of all time, but it's not a horror movie. Okay, move on anyway. We don't have to talk about it.
So let's leap away from creature features and let's get back to what Richie was saying, which does make sense about like the other seminal classic. And I mean, we're like circling Halloween and Psycho, and I kind of feel like those are the spaces. Like, what is like, because I mean, the thing is absolutely like a favorite of like horror fans, but influence, it's like, what are the other parameters that we're looking at? And I think that Psycho and Halloween, just like there is a lineage of inspiration that has been created from people who watched that and then went off and made other things, and like the DNA of that material is there. And I'm a big Halloween fan. Like, even though I picked the thing, it's just a personal preference. Like, I absolutely love Halloween. But for me, I'm also just leaning towards that by going, look, it's completely defined a subgenre. It like all of like your Freddy Kruegers, your Jasons, and even the new what is it? Art the Clown. You can trace them back to like Halloween, where they just went, okay, now we're creating one character that is just going to torment people sequentially going forward. And like that idea, and I guess Leatherface showed up first, but the one that really made the impact, that inspired people to create different versions, was Halloween. It was
Mhm.
Michael Myers. So it's difficult for me to go like, let's ignore that and go with a personal favorite when like
Yeah,
there's such a legacy that it's created.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll
Oh,
go along with that. I go along with that. Like it, I
so
don't think it's effective today, but I think for the legacy it left, it probably has to be there. So look,
okay,
we've
so
got
then.
The Shining, Rosemary's
Mhm,
Baby, and Halloween. One more.
mhm.
I think we
All
need a
right.
monster. I think we need some sort of monster.
Yeah. So we have one more. We have one left
One
after that
left.
list.
Like I can't speak
Yeah.
for 30 days. Like I think if you like maybe 28 days later makes it, maybe that like does that make the list a bit more kind of diverse based on what we've had, because you've kind of got Shining, Rosemary's Baby, 28 days later, Halloween. Like, does that cover a lot of different spaces as in Mount
Hmm.
Rushmore, or
I
what
feel
are you guys
we're
thinking?
the eras we're in. Like with those three, Halloween, Rosemary's Baby, Shining. What's the newest one? 1980?
Yeah.
I mean, that's 44 years of film, and we don't have any representation. So I think we do need something. Definitely, at least from 2002.
What do you think, Chris?
um, I'd have to rewatch Dog Soldiers again. I also just don't think that werewolves would actually have that ranking because even in the classic Universal stories, the Wolfman probably was one of the least famous
Hmm.
of that. Whereas if you do want to look at modern lineage, like the zombie film, yeah, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, it had this resurgence that came up in the mid noughties or like early noughties with the combination of the remake of Dawn of the Dead and
Mhm.
Shaun of the Dead and 28 Days Later, which all came out around the same time as well. And that just propelled this subgenre into like top tier. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm more than happy to nominate a horror, like a zombie film. It's going to be tough to be like, let's just jump over Romero and go to Danny Boyle. But
I
honestly,
think that
like, I don't know.
that that Dawn of the Dead remake is pretty goddamn good, in
Yeah,
fairness.
Sax, and it is very good. It is very good. And it
Yeah,
came out a year after 28 Days Later and had
yeah.
the fast on. Like it's if you're talking about like the reason I keep going back to Dawn of the Dead is I think, or not Dawn of the Dead, but 28 Days Later is I agree, like Romero created it. Like he made
Mm.
it, made the template, the footprint for it all. But I think 28, what it did was it redefined it. And every zombie film since then owes itself to 28 because even
Mm.
up to World War Z, everything has gone fast. Everything, even how the camera works, the camera style, even if you look at like the kind of the lighting and the high contrast style
Mm.
of Dawn of the Dead remake in 2003, it's very, very contrasty, dark. Like it's kind of its inspiration is still being felt to today,
Mhm.
and I think as well, like even 28 weeks later is a wonderful sequel. Robert Carlyle. It's like a wonderful sequel about like a man who has pain and regret for abandoning his wife in her moment of need, and then how that all plays out. Um, but yeah,
You know what's
I'm
crazy?
hanging on
You're
to that 28.
actually you're actually convincing me with it because if
Mm.
you're talking like 'cause I've been talking a lot about the legacy and the impact of what happens, and also when I look back at what we have in the first three, you're talking about like they are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is great, but they're not exactly like frenetically paced and like and exciting films. And I think
Mm,
that 28 Days does have a immense impact on what came after it.
Mhm.
Even like even editing, pacing, momentum, the technology that was used, and the impact that it had, where it inspired a lot of other films to go, let's go into a different pace, to a different
Mhm.
momentum. So you're actually convincing me because there's enough of nuance and originality to it
Yeah.
where somebody took a big swing, they just
oh
went,
yeah.
look,
Such a
this is
risk, like
Mm,
this
it's
is I'm redefining what people find
yeah,
terrifying, and one of the first things they do is slow zombies, fast
yeah,
zombies. Let's not even call them zombies. And you're like, wait, hang
mm,
on, what's going? And
yeah.
this actually happened. Like if you're looking at what I documented of like the other zombie films that came out,
Mm.
they did this, going, we're doing zombies differently, but we're filming it differently, and you're actually convincing me. I never would have thought that I'm going with 28 Days Later.
And what the movie did for like the careers of Danny Boyle and Cillian Murphy and stuff like that as well. Like it had like for such a risk and such a swing, it had such an impact on like I'm kind of in on the idea as well. Like, it's different as well. I think it makes the list quite diverse as well. You could easily put Poltergeist or Psycho or Exorcist or any of those movies in there, but I think it would, the way you've pitched it and the passion and like the impact it's had on you as a person, as a filmmaker and stuff, I can feel that. And like, I can't deny that movie. I just can't deny it.
I owe you then. I owe you.
Well, it does feel like we want that kind of creature feature kind of monster vibe. And you're also bringing in a new filmmaker as well and a new interpretation, which is really exciting, you know? Like what otherwise we go backwards and we go into the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. Like we do want like a completely different flavor. Because I am very happy with, we've got the 60s represented. We do have like, yes, The Shining and Halloween are very close together, but at the same time, they're
very different.
They're very different.
Very different.
And then in that space, it's like, what's this new wild card that you're going to throw in the mix? And I cannot believe that I'm actually convinced by 28 Days Later. If you asked me what it would be, I have a dedicated list that I'm going, hey, look, I'm okay to swap out The Thing for Halloween, but like 2002, what are we doing here? And Paul, you've actually converted me. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
excellent. Mission accomplished.
I'm happy securing 28 Days Later as the final face on the Mount Rushmore of horror films.
Cool. And if you look at the filmmakers who made all these movies.
Yeah.
Big time.
What
people.
a pedigree.
What a pedigree. Yeah. Like those four guys. Incredible. So
yeah.
Good job.
Yeah,
I like it. I like this. Is good. Good list. Solid.
Yeah. It is solid. I mean, it's not at all taken away from everybody who didn't make it, because even like I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre on its own deserves its own nomination round. But then there's Alien as well, even though Paul Bush didn't see it. Like I still think
I saw it, but like I had been spoiled by
that
else.
there's so much about it.
Alien leans way too close to the sci-fi side of it. I think it is both. But I would just put it in its own little category. I don't even think of it as a horror movie as much.
We're not changing our list, but like even the representation of South Korean and Japanese cinema, like we didn't even scratch the surface of that. It's an impossible task.
We haven't gone to Ringu. We haven't gone anywhere. We haven't gone anywhere. So it's the hardest genre.
It's chiseled in, like it's definitive, like that's what it is. So
everyone else is wrong.
You might have your own version, but that's actually your version. This is the definitive.
This is the definitive. This is it now. It's chiseled in now, guys. It's chiseled in. It's undebatable. Like
wonderful. All right, so I think that's going to be a wrap, because honestly, if we keep going, I might get inspired to like change my mind.
Wait. Saw.
Yeah.
Never mind.
And so that's a wrap. We're closing the book on the Mount Rushmore of horror. And our list is, Richie, take it away.
It is The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, Halloween, and 28 Days Later. That's the definitive, chiseled in Mount Rushmore horror movies.
And we've got a wrestler with us, so fight us like he's a champion. Okay, guys, for the listeners, if you enjoyed this on YouTube, then like and subscribe, because we're going to come back for another episode very soon. And you can check us out on Instagram on @MountRushmorons. So my name's Chris Brennan. We got Paul Bush here and Richie Owens. Until next time, take care, guys.